The city was waking up slowly that morning, with soft sunlight spilling through the tall glass buildings and lighting up the quiet streets. Inside one of those buildings, the CEO sat at his large desk, steaming cup of coffee in front of him, his eyes scanning the day's agenda. It was another busy day, filled with meetings, phone calls, and decisions that affected hundreds of people. He had always been a man of routine, someone who liked order and control, and the office reflected that. Everything had its place, from the carefully stacked reports to the polished pens in the holder beside his laptop. Despite his busy schedule, he was well liked by his employees. People respected his intelligence and his ability to make tough decisions, but few really knew him outside the boardroom. He was polite, professional, and generous in quiet ways, donating anonymously to local charities and helping employees who were struggling without ever making it public. His life was predictable, safe, and orderly, and he liked it that way. On this particular morning, the city seemed calm, almost too calm. He looked out of the window at the streets below, where a few cars were starting to move and people were heading to their jobs. He felt a sense of satisfaction in knowing that he had built something meaningful, that his company provided jobs, stability, and opportunities for many. Yet as he sipped his coffee and checked his emails, there was an unspoken feeling that today would be different. Something was about to change. The first hint came through a phone call from his assistant. Her voice sounded tense, a little shaky, and that was unusual. She explained that a severe storm had hit a part of the city unexpectedly, the news reports. Were coming in fast, and there were already images of streets flooded, trees uprooted, and buildings damaged. The situation seemed serious, but at first, he thought it was something he could manage from his office, coordinating resources and sending help where it was needed. He was a man used to planning, to solving problems from behind a desk. This was just another challenge. However, as more calls came in from employees, friends, and community members, it became clear that this was no ordinary storm. People were trapped in their homes, streets were blocked, and the city's emergency services were stretched thin. He listened carefully, processing each detail, trying to understand the scale of the disaster. He could feel a knot of concern forming in his stomach. This was beyond reports, beyond numbers. It was people, real people, facing danger and uncertainty. He spent the next hour on the phone, speaking with city officials, emergency responders, and his management team. Each conversation revealed more about the challenges on the ground. Roads were impassable, and communication lines were unstable. Several of his employees were affected. Some could not reach their homes, and others were stranded at work. He felt a growing sense of responsibility, not just as a CEO, but as a member of the community. He realized that his usual approach, delegating tasks and overseeing operations from a distance, might not be enough this time. This was personal. By mid-morning, he made a decision. Instead of staying in the office, he would go to the affected areas himself, would see firsthand what was happening, and, if possible, help directly. It was a choice that surprised even him. He had never put himself in danger like this before. His life had always been about control and safety, and now he was choosing uncertainty and risk. But the images of people trapped, scared, and in need were too powerful to ignore. He quickly gathered a few trusted colleagues who were willing to join him and loaded supplies into a company vehicle first aid kits. Blankets, bottled water, and food. It was not a huge convoy, just a small group determined to help where they could. They set out carefully navigating the flooded streets, watching as water lapped at the wheels of their vehicle and debris floated past. The scene was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The storm had left a trail of destruction, fallen trees, damaged buildings, and people wading through waist-high water. The calm city streets of the morning had turned into a scene of urgency and fear as they moved deeper into the affected neighborhoods. He saw the human side of the disaster. Families were huddled together on makeshift platforms, holding children and pets, trying to stay safe. Neighbors were helping neighbors, lifting each other out of the water and sharing what little food and water they had. There was fear, yes, but also a remarkable sense of resilience. Seeing it firsthand stirred something in him. He realized that leadership was not just about decisions made in boardrooms, it was about action, courage, and empathy when people needed it most. His first encounter was with a young mother and her 2 children, stranded on the second floor of their home as water rose around them. The mother was scared, the children were crying, and the situation felt urgent. Without hesitation, he organized a small rescue. Using a makeshift rope and guidance from the emergency responders on his phone, they managed to bring the family to safety. The relief in their eyes, the gratitude in their voices, left a mark on him. This was no longer about managing a company. It was about helping people survive and feel safe. Word began to spread that someone from the company was helping directly in the affected areas. People who had only seen him in meetings and emails were now seeing him carrying supplies, guiding people to safety, and offering calm reassurance. His employees were amazed, and strangers began to notice as well. He was no longer just a CEO. He was a presence in the storm, a source of hope in a chaotic situation. Throughout the morning and into the afternoon, he moved from one location to another, never stopping for long, always focused on helping. Each encounter was different: an elderly man stuck on his roof, a small group of neighbors trapped in a car, a family needing blankets and food. Every rescue, every small act of kindness reinforced the idea that leadership could be personal and direct. It was not about titles or authority. It was about showing up when it mattered most. Even as fatigue set in, he refused to slow down. The storm was relentless, and the city seemed to stretch endlessly with those in need. He felt the strain in his muscles and the ache in his back, but he kept moving, kept helping. It was not heroism in the dramatic sense. There were no cameras or reporters, just people in desperate situations needing someone to step forward. And he did. By the evening, the storm had begun to ease, but the impact was still clear. Streets were blocked, homes damaged, and people exhausted. The CEO finally took a moment to rest, sitting on the edge of a flooded street. Watching volunteers and emergency responders continue their work, he reflected on the day, realizing that he had changed in subtle ways. The experience had reminded him that life was fragile and unpredictable, and that real leadership meant being present, even in danger. He looked around at the volunteers and residents working together, strangers helping strangers, and felt a deep sense of connection. The city was battered, but there was resilience, courage, and kindness everywhere. He understood that while he had helped, he had also been helped, inspired by the strength and bravery of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. When he finally returned to his office late that night, drenched and exhausted, he did not think about recognition or accolades. Instead, he thought about the people he had met, the families he had helped, and the lessons he had learned. For the first time, he realized that being a leader was about more than business success. It was about empathy, action, and the willingness to step into uncertainty for the sake of others. He sat down at his desk, cleaned up, and quietly wrote notes to his team, thanking them for their support and courage. He knew the work was far from over, but he also knew that today had shown him a new side of himself, a side that would forever shape how he led, how he lived, and how he thought about heroism. That day, he had stepped out of his safe, a predictable world, and into a reality that demanded courage, empathy, and humanity. And in doing so, he had begun a journey that would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone around him. By the next morning, news of the storm's impact had spread across the city. Television crews, social media, and local news outlets showed the destruction: streets filled with water, collapsed trees, and houses partially damaged. People were talking about those who had stepped in to help, ordinary citizens and volunteers. And whispers of a company leader who had gone into the most affected areas were starting to circulate. But for the CEO, the recognition was not important. His focus was on action and making sure the people he had seen the day before were safe and had the support they needed. He arrived at the office earlier than usual, but the calm he normally felt in his routine was replaced by a sense of urgency. Phones were already ringing, emails were piling up, and messages from employees and community members poured in. He could see the worry on the faces of his management team. They had all stayed up late organizing relief efforts and trying to contact employees in affected areas. But he realized that in a disaster like this, no amount of planning could replace being present on the ground. Seeing people in need firsthand and offering guidance and support made a difference that no email or memo could achieve, he gathered a small team from his company, those willing and able to help, and briefed them on the areas that needed the most attention. They would not be working alone. Local authorities, firefighters, and other volunteers were coordinating relief efforts, but the scale of the disaster meant that additional help was essential. He explained the plan calmly, outlining what supplies they had, how to navigate the flooded streets, and how to communicate with emergency responders. There was a seriousness in his tone that inspired confidence. People trusted him not because he held a title, but because he was clearly willing to lead from the front. The group set out in company vehicles, loaded with supplies including food, water, blankets, and first aid kits. The streets were treacherous. Water-covered cars, tires, and fallen branches made navigation difficult. As they moved deeper into the affected areas, the destruction became more evident. Homes that had stood for decades were now partially submerged. Families were stranded on rooftops or balconies, and children clung to their parents in fear. It was chaos, but also a place where courage and resilience were showing in unexpected ways. Their first stop was a residential area, where several homes had been flooded. The CEO quickly assessed the situation and divided his team to ensure that as many people as possible could receive help. Some were sent to check on the elderly residents, others to help families gather essentials and move to safer locations. He personally went to a small apartment building where water had entered the lower floors, trapping people inside. A young couple with a baby was trying to keep the infant dry and calm, but panic was rising. Without hesitation, he guided them through a safe path, helping them carry the baby and some belongings to higher ground. The baby cried, frightened by the water and the chaos, and he spoke gently, trying to calm both the child and the parents. There was no time for heroics or hesitation. Every second mattered. By the time they reached safety, the relief in the parents' eyes was unmistakable. This moment, small but significant, reinforced the CEO's sense of purpose. It was not about recognition or admiration. It was about helping people in real need. As they continued, they encountered a group of neighbors stranded in their car. The water had risen so quickly that they could not drive out, and they were anxious about what to do next. The CEO assessed the scene and found a safe way to wade through the water, guiding them to solid ground. Each rescue was a test of judgment and courage. He realized that while he had experience leading a company, this situation demanded different skills: quick decision-making, empathy, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. These were lessons not learned in boardrooms or during meetings, but in the raw moments of human need. Throughout the day, he saw stories unfold before his eyes that could have easily gone unnoticed. An elderly woman trying to hold on to a railing in her flooded home, a father using a makeshift raft to carry his children, neighbors forming chains to rescue pets and belongings. Each person's struggle was different, yet there was a common thread of resilience and compassion. The CEO felt a profound connection with everyone he met, recognizing that courage could be found in ordinary acts, not just in grand gestures. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion began to show. The sun was beating down, and the physical strain of moving through water, carrying supplies, and helping people was taking its toll. Yet he continued, knowing that those who depended on them could not wait. His team, inspired by his determination, pushed forward as well. There was a quiet understanding among them that leadership meant putting others for personal comfort or safety. During a break, he took a moment to observe the larger picture. Volunteers from other organizations, community members, and emergency responders were all working together, forming an unspoken network of support. He realized that leadership was not about commanding alone. It was about inspiring collaboration, coordinating efforts, and showing people that someone cared. His presence seemed to motivate others, encouraging them to act with courage and compassion. In one neighborhood, they found a family stranded on the roof of their home, the water rising dangerously around them. The father was trying to keep his children calm, but fear was evident in their eyes. The CEO immediately organized a rescue plan. working with volunteers to create a safe path and use ropes to guide the family to safety. It was a delicate operation requiring coordination and trust. When the family was finally safe, they hugged him and his team, tears of relief streaming down their faces. In that moment, the CEO understood that heroism was not about fame or recognition. It was about being present, taking action, providing hope when it seemed impossible as the day turned into evening. The storm had subsided slightly, but the aftermath was still severe. Streets were flooded, power lines down, and people exhausted and anxious. The CEO helped organize temporary shelters, ensuring that families had food, blankets, and clean water. He stayed to oversee operations, making sure that no one was left behind. His usual business mindset, focused on efficiency and results, was now applied to human care and support. Every decision he made had immediate consequences, and he approached each with calm determination. By nightfall, the streets were quieter, but the work was far from over. Emergency responders and volunteers continued to assist those in need, and the CEO remained a visible presence. He moved between shelters, checking on families, offering reassurance, and coordinating with authorities. People who had only known him as a company leader now saw him as someone who could act decisively, compassionately, and courageously. The lines between professional and personal leadership had blurred, revealing a deeper side of him. Finally, late at night, he returned to his temporary base, exhausted but resolute. The day had tested him in ways he could never have imagined, and yet it had also shown him the power of action and empathy. He reflected on the families he had helped, the volunteers he had worked with, and the community spirit he had witnessed. He realized that leadership was not just about managing businesses or resources. It was about showing up, being human, and responding to the needs of others with courage and care as he prepared to rest. He knew that the days ahead would continue to demand effort, courage, and patience. But he also understood that the experience had transformed him. He was no longer just a CEO who managed a company. He was a leader in the truest sense, someone willing to face danger and uncertainty to protect and help others. That day had deepened his understanding of what it meant to lead, and it was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. The third day after the storm, the city was slowly starting to regain its footing. Streets were still blocked in places, power lines were being repaired, and debris littered the roads. Yet, amid the destruction, there was a growing sense of hope. Volunteers, residents, and emergency workers were everywhere, helping each other in ways that seemed to strengthen the community. The CEO knew the work was far from over. While the storm had passed, the recovery had just begun, and he felt a responsibility to continue being present, to lead by example, and to ensure that help reached those who needed it most. Early that morning, he gathered his team once again. They reviewed the areas that had received the least assistance and planned routes that were still accessible despite the flooding and damage. Communication was difficult, and roads were blocked, so each step had to be carefully coordinated. The CEO emphasized teamwork and calm judgment, reminding everyone that their efforts, no matter how small they seemed, were making a real difference. His approach was simple but effective. Prioritize safety, act quickly, and provide reassurance to those affected. Their first stop that day was a neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, where a school had been partially flooded. Families had gathered there, seeking refuge with children and elderly relatives. The CEO immediately joined in helping distribute food and water, setting up areas where children could stay dry and comfortable. He noticed a young boy clinging to his mother, scared and quiet, gently engaged him in conversation while arranging blankets and meals. Moments like this reminded him that leadership was not just about decision-making, it was about connecting with people, listening and providing comfort during fear and uncertainty while helping in the school. He noticed a teacher struggling to calm a group of children. She was overwhelmed and exhausted from managing so many frightened young students. He stepped in, helping organize activities and ensuring that the children received food and warm drinks. It was not part of his plan, but he understood the importance of flexibility and leadership. Every person he helped felt seen and supported, and in return, he learned more about resilience, patience, and empathy. Next, The team moved to a residential area where the storm had damaged multiple homes. Water was still rising in some streets, and families were trying to protect their belongings while staying safe. The CEO coordinated with neighbors and volunteers to create a path to higher ground for those most at risk. They carried mattresses, food, and essential supplies, helping families move quickly and efficiently. Each act, though physically demanding, carried an emotional weight. People were exhausted, worried, and scared. Yet their relief and gratitude reinforced the CEO's sense of purpose. During one rescue, they encountered a small group of elderly residents trapped on the second floor of a building. The stairwell was partially flooded, and the residents were unable to climb down safely. The CEO worked alongside volunteers to fashion a safe rope system, guiding each person carefully down to the street level. He talked to them calmly, offering reassurance, while his team supported him in ensuring that everyone remained safe. The experience was physically challenging, yet deeply rewarding. Seeing the relief on their faces reminded him why he had chosen to be directly involved in the first place. By mid-morning, CEO noticed the rising exhaustion in his team. Despite this, the dedication and courage of everyone involved created an unstoppable energy. Volunteers were inspired by his commitment, and residents were emboldened by seeing someone step into danger for their safety. It was a contagious form of leadership by acting selflessly. He motivated others to act with courage, compassion, and determination. The experience became less about him as an individual and more about the collective effort. The shared humanity that emerged when people faced adversity together. Later that day, they arrived at a flooded street where a car had been trapped with a family inside. The father and mother were trying to keep their children safe, but water was rising rapidly around the vehicle. The CEO quickly assessed the situation, forming a small human chain with his team and local volunteers to reach the family safely. Each movement had to be deliberate and coordinated to avoid accidents. Step by step, they reached the car, guiding the family to solid ground. The children were crying, frightened, and shivering, but the parents' expressions of relief were unforgettable. These were the moments that defined the CEO's growing understanding of what true leadership meant: presence, courage, empathy, and action. As the afternoon unfolded, he continued to move between neighborhoods, witnessing acts of heroism from ordinary people. Neighbors were rescuing neighbors, volunteers were distributing food and water, and families were working together to protect each other from the remaining dangers. The CEO felt a deep sense of connection to these people, realizing that heroism was not just in bold individual actions, but also in the quiet, persistent efforts of everyday people helping one another. This recognition humbled him, teaching him that leadership was as much about listening and supporting as it was about guiding and directing. During a short break, the CEO sat quietly on a dry patch of ground, observing the community around him. A young volunteer handed out sandwiches while an elderly woman directed children to a safe corner with blankets and pillows. He saw people from different backgrounds working together seamlessly, united by the common goal of survival and support. He reflected on his own life, realizing that while he had been successful in business, there were lessons about humanity, resilience, and courage that could never be learned in an office or boardroom. These lessons were raw, immediate, and profoundly impactful. Later in the day, encountered a home with several residents still stranded. The building had been weakened by the storm, and entering it was risky. The CEO carefully coordinated with volunteers and emergency responders, creating a plan to get everyone out safely. He encouraged the residents to remain calm, talking to them gently and offering reassurance. As the residents were guided to safety, the CEO noticed the profound relief and gratitude in their eyes. It reinforced the idea that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Leadership, he realized, was about inspiring confidence and providing hope when it was needed most. Throughout the day, the CEO also took time to connect personally with individuals, hearing their stories and understanding their struggles. An elderly man recounted losing a lifelong collection of books and photographs, while a single mother spoke of the fear of not being able to care for her children. Each story left an impression on him, shaping his understanding of the broader impact of the disaster. He realized that heroism was not just in physical rescue, but in listening, empathizing, and supporting people emotionally as well as practically. By evening, the team had made significant progress, but the CEO knew the work was far from finished. Families still needed shelter, food, and emotional support. Streets were blocked, and resources were limited. He organized temporary shelters, coordinated with local authorities, and continued to move between neighborhoods, offering guidance and reassurance. People who had only seen him as a company leader now viewed him as a figure of courage, empathy, and calm decisiveness. His presence was not just symbolic, it was tangible, providing hope and safety to those who needed it most. As night fell, the city was quieter, though the signs of destruction were still visible. The CEO took a moment to reflect on the day, exhausted but filled with a deep sense of fulfillment. He had seen fear, courage, and resilience in equal measure. He had witnessed acts of heroism from ordinary people that inspired him as much as his own actions inspired others. He realized that leadership was not about titles or authority, but about showing up, acting decisively, and caring for others in times of need. Finally, as he prepared to rest, he understood that the storm had changed more than the city had changed him. The experiences of the day, the lives he had touched, and the lessons he had learned about courage, empathy, and human resilience would stay with him forever. He was no longer just a CEO managing a company. He was a leader in the truest sense, someone who had witnessed the strength of the human spirit and chosen to act when it mattered most. And in doing so, he had begun to redefine what it meant to be a hero. By the fourth day, the city had begun the slow process of recovery. Streets were still blocked in places, power lines were being repaired, and emergency crews were working tirelessly to restore normalcy. The storm had left deep scars. But it had also revealed something powerful: the strength and resilience of people coming together in a crisis. The CEO, now deeply involved in the relief efforts, felt a sense of responsibility, not only to help with immediate needs, but also to contribute to the long-term recovery of the community. He understood that his presence had inspired people, but he wanted to ensure that support was sustainable and meaningful. The morning began with a meeting at a temporary relief center. The CEO gathered volunteers, community leaders, and local authorities to coordinate the day's efforts. Everyone shared updates on which areas were most affected and what resources were still needed. The atmosphere was serious, but there was also a quiet determination in the room. The CEO spoke with calm authority, emphasizing the importance of compassion, efficiency, and teamwork. He encouraged people to think creatively about how to overcome obstacles and reminded them that their actions, big or small, mattered to those in need. After the meeting, he and his team set out with supplies and first aid kits. The city still bore the signs of devastation: fallen trees, flooded streets, and damaged homes. Yet, amid the destruction, there were stories of hope and human connection. He witnessed neighbors helping neighbors, volunteers sharing food and blankets, and children showing remarkable resilience despite the chaos. Each encounter reinforced the CEO's understanding that leadership was not about commanding from a distance, it was about action, empathy, and inspiring others through presence. One of the first neighborhoods they reached had been particularly hard hit. Families were stranded in partially flooded homes, and many had lost access to electricity, clean water, and food. The CEO immediately organized a relief operation, assigning volunteers to different households and ensuring that emergency supplies were distributed efficiently. He personally helped a family of 5, carrying water bottles and blankets to ensure their comfort. The gratitude in their eyes and the relief in their voices reminded him why he had chosen to be directly involved. This was not about recognition. It was about providing tangible help to people who needed it most. Later, they encountered an elderly man trapped in his home. The water had risen rapidly, and he was unable to leave on his own. The CEO quickly coordinated a rescue, guiding volunteers to help him safely to higher ground. He spoke to the man with a gentle, reassuring tone, offering comfort and encouragement. Moments like these were physically demanding and emotionally intense, but they also provided a deep sense of fulfillment. The CEO realized that heroism was not just about bold acts. It was about the quiet persistence of helping people in the most vulnerable moments of their lives. As the day progressed, the CEO moved from one area to another, helping wherever he was needed. He assisted in setting up temporary shelters, ensuring that families had access to food, water, and blankets. He also helped coordinate medical assistance, checking on injured individuals and making sure that first responders had the support they needed. Each interaction reminded him of the human side of leadership, the ability to empathize, act decisively, and inspire confidence even in the most challenging situations. During a brief pause, he took a moment to observe the broader picture. Volunteers from various organizations were working side by side with local residents, creating a network of support that seemed to stretch across the city. He saw people sharing resources, offering encouragement, and protecting one another from harm. The CEO reflected on how different this was from his usual world of meetings, reports, and boardroom decisions. Here, leadership was immediate, personal, and deeply human. It was about connecting with people, understanding their needs, and acting with courage and compassion. Later in the afternoon, they came across a family trapped in a house with structural damage. The walls had partially collapsed, and the family was frightened and unsure how to leave safely. The CEO coordinated with his team and volunteers, creating a plan to help them exit the building without risk. He guided them step by step, offering reassurance and maintaining a calm presence. The family's relief and gratitude were palpable, and it reinforced the idea that leadership and heroism were often about steady, careful action in moments of fear and uncertainty throughout the day. The CEO also took time to listen to people's stories. A young woman recounted losing her home and all her belongings, while a father described the fear of not being able to protect his children. Each story left a profound impact on him, deepening his understanding of the storm's effects on individuals and families. He realized that true leadership was not only about physical action, but also about emotional support, understanding, and empathy. By listening, offering guidance, and taking decisive steps, he was helping people regain a sense of control and hope. As evening approached, the CEO and his team had assisted hundreds of people. Temporary shelters were functioning, families had received essential supplies, and volunteers were working tirelessly to ensure that no one was left behind. The CEO took a moment to reflect on the progress they had made and the work that still remained. Despite exhaustion, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The storm had been devastating, but it had also revealed the strength, resilience, and compassion of the community. Before leaving the relief center for the night, the CEO met with volunteers and local leaders to discuss plans for the coming days. They talked about rebuilding efforts, ongoing support for displaced families, and ways to involve the broader community in the recovery. He emphasized the importance of continued presence and dedication, reminding everyone that their actions, no matter how small, could make a lasting difference. His words were met with nods and quiet determination, as everyone recognized the shared responsibility they had undertaken. Finally, as he returned to his temporary base late at night, the CEO reflected on the journey so far. The storm had tested his courage, patience, and empathy, but it had also shown him the profound impact that one person's presence and actions could have on many lives. He understood that heroism was not about recognition or fame. It was about showing up, taking action, and caring for others in their most vulnerable moments. The experiences of the day had transformed him, shaping his understanding of leadership, humanity, and resilience. Lying down to rest, he thought about the families he had helped, the volunteers who had inspired him, and the community that had come together in the face of adversity. He realized that while the storm had caused destruction, it had also created opportunities for connection, courage, and compassion to shine through. Leadership, he understood, was not limited to the boardroom. It was about being present, acting selflessly, and inspiring others to do the same. And in doing so, he had begun to leave a lasting impact, not just on the city, but on himself and everyone who had witnessed his actions. By the fifth day, the city was showing signs of real recovery. Streets that had been blocked with debris were now cleared. Temporary shelters were functioning efficiently, and volunteers continued to provide essential aid to families. The CEO, who had spent the previous days immersed in relief efforts, reflected on how far the community had come. He understood that while the storm had caused immense damage, it had also revealed the true character of the people around him. Courage, kindness, and resilience were everywhere he looked, and it reinforced his belief in the power of action and empathy. The morning began early, with the CEO and his team preparing to visit neighborhoods that had received the least attention during the first days of the relief efforts. They packed supplies, ensured that medical kits were ready, coordinated with local authorities to access areas that were still difficult to reach. His team had grown accustomed to the pace and intensity, but he noticed the same determination in everyone's eyes that had marked the first day. People were willing to go above and beyond to ensure that help reach those who needed it most. Their first stop was a community center that had been damaged by the storm but was still functioning as a shelter for displaced families. The CEO helped set up beds, distributed food and water, and talked to residents, listening to their concerns and reassuring them that support would continue. He met an elderly couple who had lost their home and a young mother struggling to care for her children. He offered practical help, but also comfort, recognizing that emotional support was just as important as physical assistance. The gratitude in their eyes and the relief in their voices reminded him why he had chosen to take an active role from the very beginning. After leaving the shelter, they visited a residential street where the storm had left several homes partially submerged. Families were trying to salvage belongings and move to safer locations. The CEO organized his team to assist in carrying essential items and creating safe pathways. He personally helped an elderly man carry a box of important documents to a dry location, speaking to him gently to ease his anxiety. Each act of help, no matter how small, was significant to the people affected, and the CEO understood that these moments of connection were as important as the larger rescues. Later, they encountered a group of children trapped in a partially flooded schoolyard. Teachers and volunteers were trying to keep them safe, but the situation was tense. The CEO quickly coordinated a plan, working alongside volunteers to guide the children to a secure area. He engaged with them patiently, calming their fears and making sure they felt safe and supported. Watching the children regain a sense of security reminded him that leadership was not just about directing resources, it was about providing hope and reassurance. When people were most vulnerable, as the day progressed, the CEO continued moving between neighborhoods, assisting wherever he could. He helped coordinate medical support for injured residents, distributed food and water, and organized volunteers to assist families in need. He observed the community's resilience and the way people were helping one another, and he felt inspired by their determination and courage. Leadership, he realized, was not only about his own actions, but also about empowering others to act and make a difference. During a brief break, he reflected on the experiences of the past few days. He thought about the families he had helped, the volunteers who had inspired him, and the community that had come together in the face of adversity. He realized that heroism was not measured by recognition or titles, but by the willingness to act selflessly and make a tangible difference in people's lives. This understanding had reshaped his perspective on leadership, showing him that true leaders lead with empathy, courage, and humanity. Later in the afternoon, they came across a family whose home had been severely damaged by the storm. The father and mother were worried about their children and the loss of their belongings. The CEO worked with his team to provide immediate assistance, helping them move to a temporary shelter and ensuring they had access to food, water, and blankets. He spent time listening to their concerns, offering practical advice, and reassuring them that support would continue. The gratitude and relief they expressed reinforced the importance of being present and actively involved in helping others. As evening approached, the CEO coordinated with local authorities and volunteers to ensure that all remaining areas of need were covered. He made sure that families had access to medical care, temporary housing, and essential supplies. He continued to move between neighborhoods, providing guidance, reassurance, and assistance wherever necessary. People who had seen him only as a company leader now viewed him as someone who embodied courage, compassion, and action. His presence inspired confidence and hope, and his efforts had a tangible impact on the community's recovery. Throughout the day, the CEO also took time to acknowledge the contributions of his team and the volunteers. He spoke to them individually, thanking them for their dedication and highlighting the difference they had made in people's lives. He emphasized that their collective efforts were what made the relief efforts successful, and he encouraged them to continue supporting each other and the community in the days to come. His words were met with appreciation and renewed commitment, as everyone recognized the importance of their shared mission. By nightfall, the city was quieter, but the impact of the storm was still visible. The CEO took a moment to reflect on the journey from the first day of the disaster to this point. He realized that the storm had tested his courage, patience, and empathy, but it had also revealed the strength and resilience of the people around him. He understood that heroism was not about grand gestures or recognition, but about showing up, taking action, and making a meaningful difference in the lives of others. As he prepared to rest for the night, he thought about the lasting impact of the experience. The families he had helped, the volunteers he had worked alongside, and the community that had come together had all left a profound impression on him. He knew that the lessons he had learned about courage, empathy, and leadership would stay with him forever. He also understood that the true measure of a leader was not in titles or accomplishments, but in the ability to act selflessly, inspire others, and create positive change in the world. Finally, as he lay down to rest, the CEO felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The storm had caused immense damage, but it had also revealed the true character of the community and of himself. He had witnessed acts of courage, kindness, and resilience that inspired him and strengthened his understanding of what it meant to be a leader. In stepping into the disaster and taking action, he had become more than a CEO. He had become a hero in the truest sense, someone who led with empathy, courage, and humanity, leaving a lasting impact on everyone around him. Days after the storm, the city was slowly returning to life, but the memory of the disaster lingered in the minds of everyone who had been affected. Streets were being repaired, businesses were reopening, and temporary shelters were gradually emptying as families returned to their homes. The CEO had returned to his office, but his thoughts were still with the people he had helped. The experience had changed him deeply. He was determined to ensure that the lessons of the storm continued to guide his actions, both personally and professionally. He began the day by checking in with his team, asking about the ongoing support for families still in need. Even though the immediate danger had passed, there were lingering challenges: homes that had been damaged, children who were scared and unsettled, and families struggling to rebuild. He wanted to make sure that the relief efforts were not temporary, but sustainable. He encouraged his team to think long-term, emphasizing that leadership meant caring for people beyond the crisis itself. After a brief meeting, the CEO visited several neighborhoods to assess the ongoing needs. He walked through streets where debris was being cleared, stopped by homes that had been partially damaged, and spoke with families rebuilding their lives. Each interaction reminded him of the resilience of the human spirit. People were tired and anxious, but they were also determined, helping one another and finding strength in community. The CEO realized that while his role during the storm had been urgent and direct, the work now required patience, planning, and support. At one home, he met a mother who had been struggling to provide for her children since the storm. Their house had been flooded, and many of their possessions were lost. The CEO listened carefully as she described her challenges, offering guidance and practical solutions. He arranged for volunteers to help with cleanup and repair, and provided additional supplies to make daily life easier. The relief in her eyes and her gratitude reinforced the importance of personal connection in leadership. Being present, listening, and offering support had a tangible impact on people's lives. As he continued walking through the neighborhood, the CEO noticed children playing cautiously in a partially cleared street. He approached them, asking about their safety and comfort, and made sure that local volunteers were available to help them with meals and activities. Small gestures like this, he realized, were just as important as large-scale efforts. Providing reassurance and normalcy to children affected by trauma helped families regain confidence and hope. Leadership, he understood, was about attention to both big and small details that affected human well-being later in the day. He visited a temporary shelter where families were still living while repairs were underway. The shelter was crowded, but volunteers were working diligently to provide comfort and care. The CEO helped organize spaces for sleeping, distributed food, and made time to speak with residents. One elderly woman shared her story of losing a lifelong collection of books, while a young father spoke about the fear of losing his job after the storm. The CEO listened, empathized, and offered practical solutions, arranging connections with local charities and volunteers to provide additional support. These moments reinforced his understanding that leadership required both empathy and action. During a brief pause, the CEO reflected on how much the community had changed since the storm. He had witnessed extraordinary courage, kindness, and resilience from ordinary people. Volunteers had worked tirelessly, neighbors had helped one another, and families had found strength in unexpected places. He felt a sense of pride in being part of a collective effort, but also a deep responsibility to ensure that recovery continued effectively and compassionately. Leadership, he realized, was a continuous journey. It's not a one-time act. In the afternoon, he coordinated with his team to provide additional support for families attempting to rebuild their homes. They arranged for building materials, organized volunteer labor, and connected residents with local services to repair structural damage. The CEO also emphasized safety, ensuring that families were aware of potential hazards and had guidance on how to navigate them. His hands-on approach inspired volunteers and staff, showing that leadership was about being involved directly and setting an example for others, while helping a family repair their home. The CEO met a teenager who had been terrified during the storm. The teenager shared how scared he felt when water entered their house and how he had helped his younger siblings escape to safety. The CEO listened intently and praised the teen's bravery, explaining that heroism often came in small, quiet acts of courage. He encouraged the teenager to continue helping others and reassured him that his actions had made a real difference. This moment reminded the CEO that leadership was also about recognizing and nurturing courage in others. As the day wore on, the CEO moved to a nearby community center, where volunteers were organizing resources for families still in need. He assisted with inventory, helped pack food and supplies, and spoke with volunteers to coordinate efforts efficiently. He noticed how much the volunteers were inspired by his presence, but he made it clear that their collective effort was what truly mattered. Leadership, he emphasized, was about empowering others, inspiring collaboration, and ensuring that everyone's contributions were valued. During a quiet moment, the CEO reflected on the personal impact of the past days. The storm had challenged him physically, emotionally, and mentally. He had seen fear, despair, and loss, but he had also witnessed courage, kindness, and resilience. These experiences had reshaped his understanding of leadership, showing him that it was not only about making strategic decisions, but also about empathy, presence, and action. He realized that true leaders acted with humanity and inspired others to do the same. In the evening, he returned to his office to review the progress of ongoing recovery efforts. Reports from volunteers, staff, and local authorities showed steady improvement, but he knew that the work was far from finished. Families still needed support, homes required rebuilding, and emotional recovery would take time. He made plans to continue providing resources, coordinate volunteers, and ensure that the community remained connected and supported. Leadership, he reflected, was about foresight, planning, and a commitment to the well-being of others before leaving for the night. The CEO made one final visit to a neighborhood where several families were still living in temporary conditions. He helped distribute meals, checked on the safety of the area, and spoke with residents about their ongoing needs. One young mother shared how much the consistent support had helped her feel secure and hopeful. The CEO listened carefully and assured her that the support would continue until the community was fully restored. These personal interactions, he realized, were the heart of leadership, being present, caring deeply, and taking action that made a real difference as he finally rested that night. The CEO reflected on the journey of the past week. The storm had been devastating, but it had revealed the strength, courage, and compassion of the people around him. It had also changed him, deepening his understanding of leadership, empathy, and humanity. He realized that being a hero was not about recognition or titles, but about acting selflessly, inspiring others. In making a tangible difference in the lives of those in need, he understood that the impact of the storm would be felt for weeks, months, and even years, but the lessons learned would stay with him forever. Courage, compassion, resilience, and empathy were qualities that defined true leadership. The CEO knew that he would carry these lessons into every aspect of his life and work, inspiring others and continuing to make a positive difference. In stepping forward during the disaster, he had become more than a business leader. He had become a hero in the truest sense, someone who acted with humanity, courage, and heart, leaving a lasting impact on the community and on himself.